What's going on, guys? My name is Murder Inc. and I'm here with another Raid Shadow Legends video. Today I want to talk about faction wars. Haven't seen a ton of information on faction wars, and I think it's really important for players from early, mid, even to end game to really understand how useful it is, where it can be used, and the best way to set yourself up with success without wasting too many resources. So let's get right into it and start explaining the fundamentals of faction wars. The way Faction Wars works is you get 12 keys a day for 2 crypts a day. Now when I say crypts, I'm referring to the different factions that unlock on a 24-hour time threshold. Now we did see 3 open when the Dwarf faction was released. It's possible that that becomes a reoccurring thing. I'm not sure how Plarium's going to approach this going forward. Now the cool part about Faction Wars is you get 12 keys a day, and they're free. You don't have to pay anything for them. And the trick with the keys are if your run is not going the way you anticipated, you can leave the battle and keep the keys you used to start the crypt stage you entered. I think that's a very important point that some people don't realize. If you make it to the last stage and you got crit, unluckily, now you have one person dead, you're not going to get your 3 stars. You can simply leave the battle and retry it and not lose any keys in the process. Also, another benefit in my opinion to Faction Wars is you can find the stage and it's really good for testing champions for free. You don't have to waste energy on Minotaur, Dragon, you don't have to search too hard for affinities that align. You can simply go into a faction war, something that's relative to any content you're doing. Obviously, as the stages in Faction Wars go up and down, so do the levels of the mobs inside that stage. So if you are looking to progress in level 15 dungeons, you would simply go into a level 15 dungeon, look at the levels of the mobs, then go into a faction war and look at the levels of the waves, and you can just keep leaving until you find the specific level you are working on to see how much damage or what kind of comp is going to help you in that dungeon. So now that we went over that, let's go over the reward for faction wars. In my opinion, it's not too rewarding for an endgame player. However, early game, absolutely. Free energy, free rare books, obviously chickens, shards, and it scales up pretty good for a first time player. Obviously the thresholds are much more difficult if you're early on, but I'm going to give you the information you need to progress based on where you are at in the game without making any crucial mistakes, and hopefully you haven't already. All right, so what I want to do now is approach the audience as if I'm talking to someone who just started the game. What should I do with faction wars? Go as far as you can and don't even worry about the champions you're using. Glyphs can be gigantic for players, especially early on, and as we can see to the left of the screen here, 1 to 8% HP, 75 to 750, so on and so forth. Now, whether you're early game or end game, this should really appeal to you. Even if you're not doing the highest stages available, I mean, I've never pushed for faction wars. I just kind of did it casually. If I ever had to manual it, I always had stopped because I didn't want to spend the resources and put the effort into building teams. And then I started formulating this plan and idea on, okay, why not just make a baseline list of what I need and apply it to all factions? And as soon as I did that, I jumped from stage 15 to 19 in almost every single faction, just following a simple set of rules. So getting back to my original point about the glyphs, 8% attack, you have a chance to get it on 5 main pieces. You cannot get it on the shield, as well as your ring and banner. So let's take a median sample size. So that's 4% attack spread across 7 pieces. That's 28% attack you're getting from a glyph based on a part of the game that's free to play. So this is a literal free to play part of the game that doesn't require a lot of resources if you can follow these simple rules. So now the first thing you want to do is you want to pick a faction. When you're a newer player, you don't have access to a lot of champions, and I constantly see people asking, how do I know which rares to keep, which uncommons to keep, which ones to lose? I'm going to provide on the screen and go over a brief breakdown on what you should be looking for in the champions for the faction. And once you find a champion like that, lock the champion in game and put it in your vault and save it for later. Do not, and I repeat, do not make the mistake of saying, I will do faction wars eventually. That is the biggest mistake any player can make. I made that mistake, and I found myself having to level up champions during a fusion where I had to spend double the resources because I wasn't planning properly. So it's much easier to level as you're progressing through content than it is to say, I'm going to push all of this off and try to go from stage 1 to 16 in the next 2 to 3 resets of that crypt. It's just not efficient, and I highly recommend you start structuring yourself early on so you don't fall into this hole. So things you should be looking for in champions are as follows: an AoE attack down, an AoE defense down, an AoE CC from certain skills that a character brings to the table. You can also approach AoE CC from gear sets as long as the player has 2 AoE abilities, preferably not on a long cooldown, ideally on the A1 skill. Turn meter increase, turn meter decrease, revive champion, revive on death buff, heavy damage single target champions, heavy damage AoE champions. Now, as far as the CC sets go, in my opinion, the most useful would be a provoke set if the champion offers self-healing and is defense or health based. Also, another condition would be if you have a healer in the group with you. Stun if it's a damage champion. I don't recommend stun sets on defense champions. I don't think they can get the most amount of value out of it, since a lot of defense-based champions have debuffs that require accuracy, whereas most nuking attack champions are simply that. And even if your champion does have debuffs, you can use it as a damage dealer, and it really frees up the space for using a stun set. The last set I would recommend would be a freeze set if your champion has a baseline provoke in their kit, or if they have an aura that benefits faction wars that increases their threat according to other mobs. The most useful non-CC item sets I would recommend is a shield set and an immortal set for the extra healing and health. Now, one quick point I want to add on this list that I'm talking about here is where these certain attributes the champions can shine. So the ones for wave clearing is pretty self-explanatory, but the bosses are a bit harder, and I know a lot of players get walled there, especially on the boss that ignores damage and has its turn meter increased based on the amount of damage it takes. So what I really recommend, and it's almost mandatory for endgame players to have this, someone who steals a turn meter, decreases a turn meter on an A1, and have the ability to make them very quick, or rely on reflex gear to make sure that that boss doesn't get to go. And if it does, have a revive champion so it can revive whoever it's just one shot. So to test run the information, we're going to talk about the Undead Hordes faction. Now, if you're going through and you're slowly picking up Undead Hordes, what you want to do is you want to start looking at player abilities. You can simply go to the character screen and click on their skills, see what they do, and just scroll through them and say, this champion can help me, this champion cannot help me, so on and so forth. And as mentioned before, once you get that champion, simply lock them, put them in the vault, put them in the sparring pit, and just throughout time allow them to start leveling up. For leveling up food, it's not a bad idea to level up 2 food champion and 1 faction war champion, because like I said before, you really don't want to fall behind on faction wars due to the rewards you can get from glyphs and how beneficial they can be in the endgame, especially when making a clan boss team. Certain speeds are required to maximize the potential of most clan boss teams, and more often than not, you're going to fall 1, 2, 3 speed short. Now you have the opportunity to add a speed glyph that can, without changing any pieces of gear, you can simply add a glyph that you acquired throughout faction wars, and now your team is all set. Even if your accuracy is too low, you can add accuracy glyphs to every single piece possible, and you have the equivalent of an extra accuracy piece on. So if that doesn't really show you the value of faction wars, I'm not sure what will. So getting back to the Undead faction. So let's look at the first champion here. Quickly, you can go through and right off the bat attacks one enemy, attacks one enemy, attacks one enemy. So you can say it's pretty safe to pass on this unless it offers you the ability to completely steal the turn meter or to reduce it on his A1 hit. So the next one will be Stitch Beast, attacks one enemy. Now right here we have exactly what I was talking about. Attacks one enemy, fully depletes the target turn meter. So if you're struggling on the boss stage that's just one-shotting you, you can level up a Stitch Beast slowly to level 40, 50, give it accuracy, you don't have to max them out. You can eventually use them as food. So obviously I'm not going to sit here and go through every single rare. That was just a really good example. Another one would be Gorgorob. He offers a turn meter boost, a revive, and a heal. In my opinion, he's one of the strongest for this faction. Regardless of simply being an epic and not a legendary, you can absolutely use him all the way through stage 21. Another extremely strong champion for faction wars is Seducer. He is also a void, but he provides a ton for being a rare champion. He has a sleep on his A1. He has a decreased attack AoE on a 3-turn cooldown. That's a 100% chance with enough accuracy, which can really increase the survivability of your team. A3 is increased defense and a block debuff on all allies. And the A4 is an ally protection on all enemies and a block damage buff on the Seducer if Temptress is on the same team. The last piece of advice I would want to give before I wrap up this video is, don't be afraid to keep too many champions for a certain faction. Affinities change all of the time, making some stages much more difficult than others, so having multiple options, unless you have void affinity champions, is very, very good and helps you progress a lot quicker. Alright guys, thanks a ton for watching as always. I actually took this video from the comments like I said I would before. My next plan for a future video is covering the transition from early to mid game, as well as mid game to end game. I know recently I've been focusing a lot on endgame champions, legendary, so now I kind of want to stroll back down memory lane and give you guys the tips I wish I could have given myself when I first started the game, now to progress through this game much more efficiently. So thank you a bunch for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment below if you like these type of videos that appeal to more of the general player base instead of showcasing the high-end part of the game. Also, let me know if you have any other future ideas. As you can see from this video, I'm actively reading comments, and I will listen and see how much interest I can generate from the comments and suggestions you give me. Until next time, guys, peace out.